Next, we turn our thank yous, and the first goes to the Friends of the Darien Library. Most of you are here that are here tonight are friends. Despite a challenging economic backdrop, to say the least, over the last 12 months, the Friends came through big in fiscal 2010, and it was a record year. We topped our goal. The Friends budget is critical to the library. It represents 25 to 30% of annual library expenditures. If you're a friend, please raise your hand, and then let's all applaud this group. Now, if you're not a friend, raise your hand, right? And get ready for, if you're not a friend, please get on board. Pledge cards are going to be there on the way out, and I'm happy to report that the board is leading the way here, and we've got everybody that's a trustee on board for a pledge for fiscal 2011. The board joins me as well in appreciation for the town's support, and I know Dave Campbell's here tonight. The town's support and commitment to excellence here at the library. Our public-private partnership is really the standard that other towns aspire to match. To paraphrase David Letterman, our town library will kick your town library's ass. And then also, and the last word of thanks here, is to the 4 trustees who are going to be leaving the board this year. And we acknowledge them tonight for their many great years of service. Steve Galbraith, who chaired our investment committee and vigilantly steered our endowment through rough markets of the past few years, is one of those. Is he here tonight, Steve? I don't see him. Peggy Hersom, who headed our public relations and also co-chaired our event committee. Is Peggy here tonight? She is not. Dot Kelly served on our billing committee, was instrumental in the library achieving gold LEED certification, and also somehow figured out to navigate the halls of Hartford for remediation reimbursement. Is Dot here tonight? Dot, here you are. Dot. I need...
Leave it there. I'll get it at the end, okay?
Oh, okay. Jeez, stealing my phone.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. The thanks is all to you. And then finally, Candy, who chaired our nominating committee these past 2 years and has also chaired the program committee for the past several. And Candy, thank you very much. Thanks. The library, like the one on the slide in front of us here, many libraries are like it, up against a lot of challenges right now, mostly of a digital nature. Here at the Darien Library, we say, however, bring it on. Our technology center, our teen area, our reading room, our Bluebird terminals, our career workshops, our automated materials handling, and our many meeting rooms are examples of the staff's commitment to embracing the future and making the library more relevant through, as they call it, extreme service. I'm pleased to report that the library received some great third-party recognition here in October. We were named a 5-star library by the Library Journal, which really is the Michelin guide of the library world. So please join me in congratulating Louise Berry, Alan Gray, Gretchen Casarati, and John Blyberg and the entire staff on such a terrific accomplishment. Now I'd like to turn it over to Louise, who's going to give us the director's report.
Thank you, Jim. I'm glad to see so many friends here tonight. I have had the wonderful opportunity to be the director of this extraordinary library that is filled with extraordinary staff members, an outstanding board of trustees, and wonderful community support. This past year, we've received a lot of praise from the library field and lots of visits from thousands of librarians. People came to see our new building, but they also came to see how we do things, our service model, and to model our cost efficiencies in the way we built this building. As Jim mentioned, just last month we were made for I think the 3rd time a Library Journal 5-star library, and we have been ranked for the last 10 years by the Hennon American Public Library Ranking Index as being one of the top 10 libraries in the country for our size. Our statistics of use for our first full year in this building have been amazing. Our circulation is up 17%, library visits up 8%, program attendance up 29%, and readers advisory transactions up 73%. All of this with the same staffing level that we had in the old library 5 years ago. Only an extremely dedicated staff could have achieved these numbers, especially combined with the extraordinary customer service that our staff deliver every single day. So I'd like to thank the entire staff for their efforts in this very busy first year, but I'd also like to highlight some special achievements of a few staff members in this past year. Gretchen Casarati, who's our head of Children and Teen Service, was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker this year for a whole range of extraordinary activities in the children's room. Kira Parrott, the assistant head of Children's Services, was named to a prestigious American Library Association seminar to evaluate children's books. Sally Imes was asked to speak at numerous libraries about our nonfiction book arrangement, our Glades. Alan Gray is on a national committee to establish national standards for RFID. That's the Easy Pass that's in our book and materials handling system. John Blyberg, our Assistant Director for Innovation and User Experience, is world-renowned for developing innovative software for libraries that can be used here in this library and also by other libraries. And right here in Darien, Lois Kalka and Jen Dayton are two of our department heads that are frequently consulted by our many library visitors who wish to glean information from their expertise. I also want to recognize Erica Bess and Barbara Thomas, who are responsible for that huge 29% increase in our programming. They are the ones that Erica's in charge of our adult programs and Barbara in terms of our film programs. Pat Tone, who did an extraordinary job this year developing our books on CD collection to new levels. And last but not least, Judy Scamato, who just this last week in the Darien papers had a wonderful letter of appreciation for her patient technology support. All of our staff are to be commended for their extraordinary efforts, but I did want to highlight special achievements of these department heads and staff members this past year. Sadly, baseball season is over for us on the East Coast, but I'm reminded that a baseball player can make millions of dollars being right just 1/3 of the time. Our employees, our library employees, don't have the luxury of meeting such low standards. And sadly, they don't make the same salaries. But every day, they set out to make every single encounter between a library staff person and a patron a once-in-a-lifetime event. Whether it's finding the right book on Main Street with one of the reader's advisors, entrancing a child in story time, helping an out-of-work professional with their resume, answering a complicated question at the Knowledge and Learning Services desk, filling up this room every single Friday night for Friday films, discussing poetry or literature with one of the 70 book groups that we support, or arranging a study room for many high school students who use us. This is the busiest and highest ranked library in Connecticut and one of the most highly regarded libraries in the nation, with extraordinary usage statistics and a reputation for great customer service. For one reason alone, the library staff here is the best there is. And coming soon, we have a special treat for you. Manny Perez, who's been a success in the advertising and filmmaking business, has been working on a documentary film about the Darien Library and what it means to the community. Some of us have seen a special preview of this movie, and there's some segments in it that show the library staff engaged with the public in these one-on-one, once-in-a-lifetime encounters. And I had tears in my eyes when I saw it, even though I see it in real life all the time. Manny really captured the essence of this Darien Library, which is that extraordinary customer service. And we will be showing this documentary as soon as we have the final cut, and I hope that you will make an attempt to be here to see it, because I think you will have the same pride that I have in this library staff and what they accomplish every single day. In closing, I want to thank the staff the library board for its incredible support, especially Jim Clark, our president, for his leadership and guidance these last 7 years, the community, and Dave Campbell for its support, and especially you, our friends of the library. Without your support for this library, none of this would be possible. So thank you very much.
And now on to the official business. I'd like to introduce Candy Wheelock, head of the Nominating Committee.
Okay. The nominating committee this year was composed of Mary Bennett, Jim Clark, Ann Mandel, Curtis Roach, and myself. I'm pleased to propose the following slate of trustees nominated for 3-year terms, which would be 2010 to 2013, are the following: Dulcie Brainerd, Amy Chilnooky, Randy Heck, Sue McGraw, and Sue Weaver. Nominated for re-election to 3-year term expiring in 2013 are Press Romine and Rich Vandenbroek. I move that this slate be approved.
So moved. Can we get a second? Okay, second. All friends to vote on the directors, friends only. All those in favor of the slates proposed? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. So the motion is recorded.
Phew. Okay. I'd also like to convene new board, Okay. Convene a new board for election of officers. The proposed slate is as follows. For officers for the years 2010-2011, President is Bruce Ferguson, Vice President is Brian Peoples, Treasurer Kathy Hamill, and Secretary Margot Condon. I move that this slate be approved.
Can we get a second from the floor? Now, this is just the board members who will second from Tad, and then the board members only will, the new board will vote. This is the tricky part. I've seen it messed up in the past. So if the new board will just raise your hand in favor. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Okay.
And please join me in congratulating and thanking our new trustees and officers. And thank you, Candy. Terrific work there. It's been a real pleasure to work with Bruce Ferguson, who's now our president, as a trustee over the last few years and as vice president. He's been insightful, diligent, and entertaining at the meetings, and the library really could not be in better hands going forward. So let me introduce Bruce Ferguson.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. Really looking forward to being president of the library. And the first thing I'd like to do, though, is thank Jim for the tremendous leadership and guidance that he's provided to this library over the last 7 years. He joined the board in 2003 and has been treasurer, has been on the building committee, and president in those 7 years. So if you look at what we've done here at the library, we've gone through a capital campaign to build this great new library. We've gone through some tough financial times, and Jim has been at the center of all of those things. So on behalf of the board and the staff and the community, I'd like to thank you very much for all of the service, leadership, and guidance that you've provided to this great organization. We also have a couple gifts for you. First, we'd like to give you that, and second, I guess I'll tell what's in here because it is a timely gift, both for electronics and fun things to have, but also for libraries and reading and everything. We got you a new iPad here, so enjoy that for many hours.
You've made some Clark children very happy there. Thank you for
And don't go too far, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
Because we would like you to also please introduce our speaker
Of course,
tonight.
I will do that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Some kids in the Clark family just were made very happy. Thank you very much, Bruce. And shortly after Evan introduced me to her friend Isobel back in 1989, I think I said something like, "Gee, she seems like a cool regular gal." Whereupon Evan promptly advised me that Isobel was not just another cool regular gal, but also an Oxford University PhD who could fly and speak Japanese. Of course, that was just the beginning, because she's gone on to, along most importantly, with her husband Struing being parents of 5 terrific kids. But she's been a partner at McKinsey. Am I still?
I think we could do.
I can probably.
We can do better than that.
Very important part here. Am I back on? Anyway, so she's gone on to be a partner at McKinsey. I'll finish this up without it. Starting her own healthcare services company, and is now senior fellow for U.S. foreign policy at the Council of Foreign Relations in New York, where she also heads up a bunch of other things. It was from that platform that she traveled the world of Islam, and especially the Middle East, building the knowledge for the book that she published earlier this year, Paradise Beneath Her Feet: How Women Are Transforming the Middle East. So please join me in thanking Isobel for coming here and welcoming her to Darien Library.
Am I back on? No. Okay.
We're working on it.
It's okay. I can speak. Oh, there we go. Back on. Okay. I can speak loudly as a mother of 5. I have my mother of 5 voice, but I don't need to use it. Let me just say, aren't Jim and Evan just great people for this community? Great dear friends of mine, so thank you. Well, it's really an honor to be here. And I just returned from a 10-day speaking tour in Pakistan, where the United States enjoys a 17% approval rating in that country. And we now have a $50 million budget that the Public Affairs Office is running out of Islamabad to try to improve that 17% approval rating. And one of the things they're madly trying to do is restore libraries. We used to have a network of libraries all across the world that was run by the old USIA, the United States Information Agency, which in the 1990s was cut out of the State Department budget for cost-saving purposes. I think the entire budget of USIA was something like $50 million. And in the nadir of our budget crises, which actually seem quaint now, but back then in the 1990s, in an effort to save some money, we were, unfortunately, penny wise and pound foolish, and we shut libraries all around the world, including in Pakistan. And I met so many Pakistanis who said, if only we still had those wonderful American libraries. We remember them so fondly. We used to go there. It was our one place where we could really connect with American culture, American books, American speakers. So it's just I think, a testament to how important libraries are. And here we are trying to reopen libraries at a multiple of the cost of what we used to have. Anyway, as you heard from the introduction, I'm a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. I've been there for the past 8 years, and my regional focus is on the Middle East. My Middle East includes Afghanistan and Pakistan. I travel to that part of the world regularly. And I came to write this book because my functional expertise is really in development economics. And I'm sure many of you are aware of women's rights as a human rights issue. I'm sure you've seen the pictures of women with their noses cut off for the sin of having dared to disobey her husband, or a woman sentenced to be stoned to death in a country like Iran, or many, many incidences like this around the world. All of these are, in my opinion, gross human rights violations. But underneath the human rights violations, we have a really core economic issue, which is the Middle East broadly, including Afghanistan and Pakistan, is one of the fastest growing regions in the world by population, and a poor region. Outside of the very rich Gulf countries, there are many poor countries in that part of the world. And it is a part of the world that has underinvested in half of its population. And so part of the reason that they're poor is because they handicap themselves by underinvesting in women. And so you have some of the lowest literacy rates in the Middle East and certainly in South Asia, female literacy rates of any countries in the world. And these have very long-term, significant economic consequences. So clearly there are human rights issues, but my focus has been more on the economic side. And what we know from an economics perspective is that when you invest in girls and women, it actually has the highest return on investment of any development investment you can make. And Larry Summers was very unswerving in promoting this idea when he was chief economist at the World Bank. The highest ROI is in girls' education. Now, when you educate girls, they grow up to be more educated mothers, and they make better decisions about themselves. More educated women have a lower rate of maternal mortality. They're able to take care of themselves better as pregnant women. They raise healthier children. They are more likely to educate both their sons and their daughters than certainly than an uneducated mother, but even more so than an educated father. The vector is through the mother, not through the father. They're going to have fewer children in their lifetime. The straightest line correlation between lowering fertility in the world is with girls' education. So there are countries in the world that have tried numerous things to lower their fertility rates. India, for example, has had over the years some very coercive measures towards family planning, and they have failed. And one thing that we know works is when you educate girls, fertility rates fall. So in a country like India, you have states in India that have 100% female literacy and replacement level fertility. Kerala, for example. You have other states in India that have 20% female literacy and some of the highest fertility rates in the world. Rajasthan. Straight line correlation. So educated mothers have healthier children, fewer children. They also are more productive as workers. Now, not everybody's going to work for paid income, but the fact is women all over the world work. In Africa and sub-Saharan Africa today, women do 80% of the agricultural work. In South Asia, they do 75%. There has been a feminization of agriculture as men have left the farms seeking paid employment in cities, and women are left to till the fields. And they have lower levels of education than men, and they are therefore less productive. And so there's now a huge push to increase agricultural productivity in places around the world to help food security. And we know that one of the most effective ways to do that is by increasing female literacy. So this brings me back to my book. When I look across the Middle East, it's very clear from an economic development perspective that investing in women and promoting women, women's empowerment, is critically important to that part of the world. But how is it going to happen in a region where women's rights is seen in a very negative light? In fact, in recent decades, you've had the rise of a political Islam, which has equated women's rights with many negative things. With Westernism, with materialism, with a neo-colonialism, and in some countries like Afghanistan, with communism. So women's groups are up against many different challenges. Now, this has been true around the world. Women's groups have always been up against many challenges. When you're trying to change culture, it's extremely difficult. Women's groups in the United States were very much leaders of the suffrage movement that launched at Seneca Falls in 1848 in this country. But it wasn't until 1920 that women had the constitutional right to vote. It took 72 years, And along the way, they were labeled as anti-family and anti-Christian. Now, I don't think anybody today would presume that women voting could be either anti-family or anti-Christian. Quite the opposite. But for many decades, that's how they were, their opponents depicted them. And in the Middle East, women's groups likewise are depicted as being somehow stooges of the West, following some slavish colonial agenda, or worse, being anti-Islamic. So what I have seen over the recent decade, and actually going back now, this is a movement that really has roots going back 20, 30 years, are women trying now to promote women's rights in that part of the world. There have been many secular women's groups which have appealed to international human rights language, universal principles, but it hasn't worked so well for them in the deeply conservative, traditional, and frankly, countries with Islamic systems, and where political Islam is very vibrant. And so today, they are now taking another tactic, which is to actually work within an Islamic discourse itself, finding more progressive interpretations of Islam that allow for women's rights. And they're using that to push for change, economic change, educational change, political change. In a country like Morocco, for example, you had a grassroots women's movement which for many years tried to reform the family law in that country. And family law affects everybody's day-to-day life. It dictates things like marriage, custody of children, divorce, inheritance, things that really touch people's day-to-day existence. And the family law was very skewed against women. And the women tried to revise the family law, and they kept butting up against this argument from conservatives in society saying, you can't. It's the Sharia, it's Islamic law. We are an Islamic country, you cannot change it. And the women didn't buy it. They went to a range of Islamic scholars and said, here are the changes that we're looking for. Is there not a reading of Islam which allows and indeed justifies these changes? And the scholars said, yes, there is. And with that religious support, they were able to convince at a grassroots level that what they were trying to do was not against Islam, in fact was very much consistent with Islam. They had support from the king, top-down support, and a bottom-up grassroots movement, which in 2004 resulted in a very transformative effect in their family law. So these types of changes are happening now across the region. There are three things that I see as driving it. One is, finally, rising levels of female education. So this is a part of the world that has underinvested in women's education, but that is slowly beginning to change. And so now you have a phenomenon happening in the Middle East that's happening in other parts of the world, where women are beginning to outnumber men at the college level. So in a country like Egypt, you now have full enrollment of both boys and girls at the primary school level. And in a country like Iran and Saudi, you're seeing the gender gaps disappear at the primary level. And you're seeing actually women begin to outnumber men at the secondary and tertiary levels. So in Saudi Arabia, for example, 63% of college graduates are women. In Iran, the gap in recent years has been as big as 70%. 70% of all college graduates are women. Now, people say to me, what type of change is this? These women in Saudi, for example, they go to all women's colleges and they come out and they can't get a job. And I say, you know, what you're describing is America in the 1950s. And if you only looked at that, you would have missed the very significant demographic changes that were in the works in our country. And in a country like Saudi, you're right. It's not a revolution. These women do get out, and only 5% of them actually work. But we're at the cusp of significant change, because these women are pushing for change. They're pushing into the workforce slowly, and they're up against enormous restrictions, and they want change, and they're arguing for it from a very educated and articulate perspective. In Iran, you couldn't help but notice last year that the Green Movement was led by women. Women in the streets not just your northern Tehrani women with their headscarves pushed back on their heads, the more secular elite women. These were conservative women who should be the backbone of the revolution, out in the street in their full black chadors, fighting with the police, fighting with the Basij, because the revolution has not delivered what they thought it would for them. And this is a phenomenon that's happening across the region. So education is one driver. Media is another. In the last 10 years, we've seen an explosion of new media in that part of the world, which has delivered some very bad, some very negative things, as we know. But it's also delivered a lot of positive that Americans are much less aware of. There are shows like the American show The View. There's an Arabic version of The View called The Sweet Talk. It's 4 women sitting around in a very similar, living room style format, and they discuss all sorts of issues that previously were very taboo. Things like domestic violence, polygamy, incest, rape. And they bring it into people's living rooms, and they're having very open conversations and challenging views that, as I said, were previously not even spoken about in public. 43% of viewers of the Arabic version of The View are men. So it's really, you're beginning to see new forms of media have enormous penetration. The most popular show in the Middle East, after Baywatch, which was #1 for many years, the most popular show is a Turkish soap opera, which everyone's addicted to. And it depicts a man who is a model husband. He has one wife. He treats her with respect. He includes her in conversations. She's very much involved in family decision-making. And he has become, an idol across the Middle East. Everybody now says they want a Turkish husband. But the point I'm making is that television and media has a way of changing people's cultural perceptions. I mentioned I was just in Pakistan, and I met with lots of people there, including a group of female journalists. And the journalists, again, rising levels of education, you have a new generation of women who are pushing into fields like journalism. And they're covering in the media stuff that the men are not interested in and would never cover. Things like rape, things like harassment, things like sexual abuse, many subjects that also some of the laws that are unfair to women. And they're covering these stories in a way that men never would. But they're also saying how the television depicts women in such a way that it makes their job so much easier, because now Pakistanis are used to seeing women on television. All of the popular news anchors in Pakistan are these beautiful, intelligent Pakistani women. The news anchors are dominated, just as they've become dominated in our country by women. In Pakistan, they're all women, and they view it as an incredible lever for them to change the society in which they're trying to work. That's 2. The third thing that I think is beginning to drive some of the change is extremism. So people in the region understand increasingly that extremist views towards women go hand in hand with extremist views. Now, Morocco changed its family law, but it's done a number of other things to begin to bring women out of the shadows and more into the public sphere. Just as an example, Morocco started a program to train women as female preachers, Muslim preachers that can do everything that the men can do except lead the Friday prayers. And senior government officials talk about the program as a counter-extremism measure, because they understand that Morocco has become, and particularly in the countryside outside of some of the big cities, a hotbed of extremism. So many of, Morocco itself was beset by terrorism, had terrible attacks in 2003, 2004 that really rocked the country. And many of the people, the jihadis who were picked up in Iraq, many of them came from Morocco. And many of the terrorists who were picked up in Europe also came from Morocco. And this is of enormous concern to the country. So they have this idea that by training women as preachers, that they will go out and preach a more moderate version of Islam, a more progressive interpretation of Islam, and by dint of being a female religious voice, they're breaking down stereotypes and breaking down some of those most conservative views. And this is, as I said, led by government officials who view this as a counter-extremism measure. In Saudi, you've seen a similar thing. You know, in 2002, there was an incident I write about in my book where a group of female students in a school in Mecca, one of them was smoking, she dropped a cigarette in the hallway, the school caught on fire. The girls fled the school, and as you can imagine, in the chaos, they forgot to put on their abayas. And the religious police on the street pushed these girls back into the burning school. And several of them died. And this caused an uproar in Saudi society. You had female journalists for the first time covering the story. You had male journalists who very courageously broke the story and covered the story. And it was, in many ways, an outpouring. You know, this was right after 9/11. It was 10 months after 9/11. And Saudis had been very defensive about 9/11. You know, this couldn't have been Saudis. It wasn't the Saudis who did this. It was the CIA. It was Mossad who did it. You know, they denied 9/11, many of them publicly. Prince Nayef, the king's brother, publicly denied that Saudis could have been involved in 9/11. But they knew, deep down, they knew that Saudis were involved, and they knew that this extremism came out of their own society. And after this fire at the girls' school, it unleashed public discussion, public dissent over where did the religion go so wrong that girls could be pushed back into a burning building in the name of piety. And you've seen some changes begin to happen within Saudi society that have actually been most dramatic for women in the past 8 years in that country. And one of the women I write about, Sabria Jawar, is a Saudi journalist who really came of age after this girls' fire in Mecca. She went through an internship program and worked her way up through the ranks and became the first female bureau chief of a Saudi paper. And, you know, again, these are all incremental changes. It's not a revolution, it's an evolution. But change is happening, and it's happening across the region. It's happening for a variety of reasons, and more often than not, women are leading and driving and benefiting from that change. I promised Jim I would only talk for about 20 minutes, so I think I'm at my limit. But I'm happy to take questions, and thank you all for coming tonight.
Are programs like Room to Read and 3 Cups of Tea, are they having any impact there, educating girls? Do you see those anywhere?
You know, Room to Read is focused more in South Asia and in Sub-Saharan Africa than it is in the Middle East. But there are lots of programs like that. But at the end of the day, you know, you really need programs that can be at scale. And Room to Read and Greg Mortensen schools are certainly having an impact in those communities. But, you know, I go back to Pakistan, and this is a country of 170 million people. And I just did a speaking tour there that was pretty darn hostile, to be perfectly honest. The Pakistani impulse is to blame the United States for every bad thing that is going on in that country. And I push back on my audiences pretty hard by reminding them that Pakistan spends one of the very lowest levels of any country in the world on education. It spends less than 2% of its budget on education. And it spends, by official statistics, 23% of its budget on the military, but most analysts would say that number is actually between 40 and 60%. And so they are allocating resources in a suicidal way. And Pakistan also has one of the highest birth rates in the world. It's a country of, I said 170, I think it's actually 180 million people. And by 2050, it will be a country of 350 million people. And, you know, what I reminded my audience again and again is, with a denominator of 350 million, it's a denominator for everything in your country. You know, this is a country that's running out of water. Despite the recent floods, it has water shortages. It has energy shortages. You know, there was The electricity was off half the time, you know, it was going on and off the whole time I was there, even in nice hotels. It has food security issues, and it has a 66% enrollment rate of kids in school. So, you know, this is Karachi alone has 4 million kids of school age who are not in school. So I point out, look at your neighbors. You know, India today now has a 90% enrollment. That drives them crazy to hear about India, but India today has a 90% enrollment of kids at school age. Bangladesh, which was its poor cousin, you know, it was East Pakistan. Bangladesh today has an 88% enrollment. You know, Bangladesh was the basket case of Asia. They've managed to get their kids in school, and Pakistan is at 66%. And I told you this, the very clear statistics, straight line correlation, female literacy and fertility. They have very low female literacy, and they have one of the highest fertility rates, and they will not change that dynamic without addressing their educational needs. Now, USAID has a massive, you know, new commitment to education in Pakistan, where we as a country are investing $360 million in Pakistani primary education, and that's more than we're spending in the rest of the world combined. But it won't solve their problem. They have to solve their problem. And that's a long way of saying, yes, Room to Read is great. I support Room to Read. You know, what Greg Mortensen's trying to do is wonderful too. But at the end of the day, governments have to take on their responsibility of educating children, because in a country like Pakistan, it's simply too big a problem.
What is your take on microfinancing as a solution to the economic situation in that part of the world?
The question is, what do I think of microfinance in that part of the world? And microfinance has, I think, a problem of being touted as a silver bullet. And it's not a silver bullet. It is wonderful in many respects. It has enormous impact on individuals at a micro level, but it has not demonstrated true macroeconomic transformative powers. So the average microfinance business employs something like 1.3 people. It's very small employment numbers. So it's very much self-employment. The vast majority of microfinance businesses do not ever grow to any type of scale. But where microfinance has proven to be very transformative is in terms of women's empowerment. And women who take microfinance loans, there's all sorts of data that show that they're less likely to experience domestic abuse and domestic violence. They're more likely to be included in decision making. They're more likely to vote. They're more likely to educate their children. They're more likely to provide better nutrition and vaccinations to their children. And so in that sense, microfinance is very empowering to women. It is not an economic driver, an economic engine, although it definitely helps smooth consumption for very poor people, provides a bit of a safety net, and takes the edge off of poverty. But it's not a driver of economic growth. But in a country like Bangladesh, where you've seen now 40 years of microfinance, I think part of the reason that you have an 88% enrollment rate in school is partly from the efforts of BRAC and Grameen in Bangladesh. In the back.
When all is said and done, it's really males that control the society in most of the countries. And the only books that you get sometimes are these books written by women like Noni Darnish and Ayaan Hirshali and Bridget Gabriel. Are there any male similar authors still living who have written books to really expose from a male point of view what the women are going through over there?
Thank you. So the question is about the important role of men, and are there any men who are writing about these issues? And there certainly are, and I write about a whole bunch of them in my book, because the men are critically important from a number of different perspectives, but from a scholarship perspective, I was talking about how the women are using more progressive interpretations of Islam. And men, for the most part, are the creators of religion. And it is the male scholars who have provided many of those progressive interpretations that the women are relying on. There are female scholars who are doing that too, but many of the most influential are men. And There are people like Khalid Abu al-Fadl, who's a Middle Eastern scholar who now actually teaches at UCLA. And there's another one, Abdullahi An-Naim, who is a Sudanese scholar who teaches at Emory. Now, it's no coincidence that they both teach in the United States. They are intellectual exiles from their own countries. But their work has been translated back into Arabic and is very influential today for these women's groups on the ground who use their scholarship to work with local religious leaders to help push for change. And you do see local religious leaders offering support, both moral and intellectual support to these women's movements. And there's no place that you see this more than in Iran. And some of the most senior scholars in Iran have been very influential and very supportive of the women's movement in Iran. So in Shiism, Iran is a Shia country, there are about a dozen grand ayatollahs, so the highest level of Shiism. And one of them is Grand Ayatollah Sistani, who's in Najaf in Iraq. Another is Khamenei, the supreme leader in Iran, although his credentials are suspect in that respect. But another is Grand Ayatollah Montazeri, who just recently passed away. His rulings were increasingly at odds with the establishment in Iran. And he issued fatwas that were very much in support of the women's movement and very much against some of the laws that the government was trying to put in place. There's another Grand Ayatollah, Saneh, who I write about in my book, who is known as the woman's mufti because he gives so many progressive rulings and fatwas that are in support of the women's movement. Now, Montazeri spent the last years of his life virtually under house arrest in Iran. Saneh, right now, in the same way, is very much isolated and under house arrest. But his views are increasingly well known and popular. The more the government tries to silence and squelch these people, the more young people flock to their ideas. So what is forbidden is sought after. And it's interesting to see how their views on democracy and on women's rights have evolved in recent years. But I just give that as an example. But in so many places, in Saudi, I write about the business community in Saudi. They want to be part of the global economy. They have this big international business conference where they get speakers from all over the world to come and speak. And I actually spoke at one of their business conferences on entrepreneurship, which is a rather funny story that shows up in my book. But they got Bill Gates to come and speak at one of their conferences, and they were so proud to have, famous Bill Gates. And Bill Gates got up, and when you speak at a business conference in Saudi, the room is segregated. There's a huge barrier right down the middle. Women on one side, men on the other, and with a huge 7-foot barrier that, they can't be seen across. And Bill Gates stood up there and he said, "Hey, guys, look at this. If you think you're going to make it in the global economy with this, you got to be kidding. You're a bunch of losers. You're going to lose. You can't do it this way." And he went off, and the women cheering, dead silence from the men. But the business community in Saudi has been very supportive of trying to push for change because they get it in their gut. They know they can't be internationally competitive living under gender apartheid, which is what they have.
Hi. You speak about democracy and women's empowerment. The Middle East is obviously very, very dissimilar from one country to another. However, with the evolution of the media, has there been any interchange of ideas amongst the various Middle Eastern Arab countries and the Arab Muslim population in Israel, or Israel itself, where women obviously hold a very high position, not only in government, but in any aspect of life, both Arab women, Christian women, and Jewish women?
So the question is, are Arab women learning from Israeli women who have a very vaunted position in society? That's a tough one. It's a tough one for them to be seen or to be acknowledging that they're learning from Israeli women. It's a tough one to be seen that they're somehow learning from American women. Comes with a lot of baggage. But the answer is yes. There are lots of transnational groups that are emerging, and Israeli, particularly Israeli Arab, but also Israeli Jewish women are part of that. And some of what the Israeli women face from conservative elements in their own society is very similar to what Muslim women face in their society. And they actually, I've been on panels with a woman from a very conservative Jewish party in Israel talking about how the type of obstacles that she has come up against, and the Arab woman thinking, this is like exactly the same type of thing. And there are these groups now that are forming relationships across borders to share ideas and best practices and tactics. And there are international organizations that support this networking among the women, particularly at a political level, when you're trying to push for legal and political changes. And Arab and Jewish Israeli women have been part of those networks. Down here.
Yes, the Queen of Jordan has been quite vocal about education and women. I'm just curious how she's received in these countries.
The question is about Queen Rania in Jordan, who's been very supportive of education. Well, she's a real global celebrity. She's very beautiful, and she's got an ability to attract a lot of media attention and a lot of funding behind her. Jordan is not a wealthy country. It's not an oil country. It's a poor country. But Jordan has really put itself out there in terms of educational reform in its own country. It's one of the countries where girls now outnumber boys at the secondary school level. And they're trying a bunch of innovative educational reform initiatives. Queen Rania has really attached her name both to girls' education and to microfinance. And I think she does a terrific job at drawing global attention, not only in the Middle East, I would almost argue even more outside the Middle East, and bringing resources and technical expertise to the problems at hand. But she's a great spokesperson for these causes.
What are you seeing in infant mortality trends in your region?
The question is what's happening with infant mortality, and it's going down, significantly. You have declines in infant mortality across the region that has contributed to part of the population explosion, because people still have, in some countries, very large families, which is really driven by high infant mortality rates that have really been history now for 15 years. And so almost every country has significantly reduced its infant mortality rates. Even Afghanistan, what you've seen is very, very big reductions in infant mortality, to partly, from low-hanging fruit, improved sanitation, improved hygiene, and vaccinations. With the end of the civil war that came about with our invasion of the country in 2001, you've had a dramatic increase in infant vaccinations that have reduced infant mortality by about 40,000 babies a year. So something that we don't really hear about much, but it has been a significant decline. In the back here?
Given your exposure to the region and extensive exposure, I was wondering, what about other minorities, other traditional societies that are non-Muslim, Christians of different faiths, and Zoroastrians, and smaller Armenians, and especially in Central Asia, where you have many different societies? How resistant are they to women empowerment and women's rights?
The question is what's the attitude of other minority groups to women's empowerment? And I have found that women are up against cultural constraints right across the board. This is not something unique to Islam by any means. So it's true right across the board. What the Muslim women are up against is a political narrative in their countries where Islam is dominant that equates these changes not only with trying to take on patriarchy or cultural change, but also taking on religion. But women in minority groups face many of the same challenges that Muslim women face in that part of the world.
We've got
Couple
time
more?
for one more question.
Okay, sir, right here.
Do you think the gains by women are going to have an impact on population growth?
Well, the question is, will the gains by women have an impact on population growth? And in countries where you've seen increasing female literacy, you've seen declines in population growth. I mean, right across the board. The only outlier is Saudi Arabia, where you have high levels of female education, and the declines in fertility have not been as great as you would presume, because it's a very rich country, and the barriers to women working are enormous. But Egypt now is basically at replacement level in terms of population. It's a country of 70 million people. Population momentum will take it up to 90 million people, not because of fertility rates, but because you have just a very young cohort going to go through childbearing years. But it's, countries like right across the board, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, Iran is at replacement level. So you've seen countries, Jordan, really bring their fertility rates down. There are outliers. Yemen has a very high fertility rate, low literacy. Morocco, high fertility, low literacy. Afghanistan, high fertility, very low literacy. Pakistan, high fertility, very low literacy. They go hand in hand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isobel. That was a very interesting and important topic, and thank you for coming tonight. And Jim and Evan, thank you very much for inviting Isobel and arranging this. I'd also like to thank Evan as well, which I missed earlier, but for all of her commitment to the library over the last 7 years as well. And the family, as we all know, volunteering is more than just the person in the room. It's a family affair. So thank you again for everything. Isobel will be signing her book, Paradise Beneath Her Feet, in the Main Street area afterwards, and we invite everybody to please join us in the Main Street area for a reception afterwards. Okay. Louise? Okay, well, thank you all for coming to the annual meeting. Thanks for supporting the library.